Hey everyone, this is Dark Ages Workshop from the Grimdark Compendium, and today I'll show you a cool and pretty simple recipe for painting flesh in the Grimdark style. So I immediately noticed that the expression of this miniature is pretty strong, so I want that to stand out during the paint job. I will start by giving a simple base coat and a wash to the rest of the miniature, just to give it some context and start to explore a possible color palette. For the flesh, I'm going with a simple and flexible recipe that results in a sort of dark fantasy aesthetic. A good compromise between looking realistic but also stylized in some way. Let's say that this will be an ogre for Mordheim. In order to maintain the process efficient and fun, I'm going to be using acrylic paints and washes to prime the miniature and create a visual guide. So those colors are just going to be staying in place. Citadel, AK Interactive and Vallejo are my choices here. Then I'm going to use a couple of oil paints from Abtalum 502 and Villainy Ink's enamel washes. Being solvent-based paints, oils and enamels will blend with each other, and I will take advantage of this during the painting process. It will require a little bit of back and forth between brushes and applications, as I will be manipulating the colors and blend them together. But I actually think that's the fun part of the whole process. By using Villainy Inks, I can wash the miniature and at the same time also create visual variety, surface finish variation, and implement some special effects. Let's see how we can do it in a few steps using this flexible method. If you're interested to know more about Villainy Inks, I highly recommend you to check out the resource page on the Grimdark Compendium. It's got all the information you could possibly need, like in-depth descriptions, how to use them, and also demonstration videos for every single Villainy Ink, so you can see them in action. It's absolutely free, so make sure to check out the link in description. Let's go back to our miniature. For the base color of the skin, you can use whatever you prefer. Here I've used an ivory primer, and then I start adding Vallejo German Red Brown, diluted with 2 parts water so it applies very light and transparent. This goes mainly around the eyes area, the entirety of the nose and gums, creating this warm zone roughly in the shape of a triangle. After this, I mix the red-brown with AK Interactive pastel yellow and some water, and just transition the warm tone to get rid of those rough contours. Especially with flesh, I feel it's important to find a balance between warm and cold tones. So now that I have some warm values, I start to introduce some cold around the eyes. I will do this with Citadel Carobor Crimson, diluted with 3 parts water, so it is very light and transparent, as we don't want to build up colors too strong and too fast. I can proceed with Colia Green Shade by Citadel, but this time I'll focus on the jawline and the lower part of the face. I imagine it like a 5 o'clock shadow. Again, I want this diluted 3 parts water, so very transparent. If I add too much blue, it's going to look more lifeless, and it's gonna feel more like an undead creature. So the forehead is kind of neutral. Then we have a zone around the eyes and nose with a predominant warm tone, and ending up with a colder hue towards the lower part of the face. Now that I have my visual guide done in acrylics, these will stay locked in here. They're probably going to be covered up in later stages, but I feel they need to be here in order to make transitions look correct, and I do this all the time. I let everything dry, no need for varnishing or anything like that, and I come in with Villainy Ink Dystopian Brown to apply a unifying wash and filter. Lately, I've been getting used to spraying enamel washes through an airbrush. However, you can normally apply it manually with a brush. The cool thing about enamel products is that they leave a slightly grainy texture to create visual variety, and they remain interactable for a long time before they cure. This means that we can come with a Q-tip dipped in mineral spirits and absorb the excess pigments, or instead, use a brush to move them around, leaving them just in certain areas or recesses. After dystopian brown is mostly removed, the flesh has more of a unified look. My visual guide is still visible, but everything was toned down a little and unified together. Next up, I proceed with Villainy Ink Carry-On Crimson, which is also an enamel wash, but specifically designed to be a flesh effect. This is how it looks like on a straight surface. There are these microscopic pigments floating around. These will recreate all sorts of skin flaws, pores, and mottling on flesh. And the wash itself will dry with a sort of satin sheen. This application is diluted 1:1 with mineral spirits, and I place it around the eyes and nose, and a tiny amount on the gums of the figure, basically following the guide that I made myself with the warm tones. After a quick flash of hair dryer, I come with a soft, clean, dry brush and blend this crimson around. You see it spreads out and still remains workable. This procedure is called feathering. I smooth out the pigments, decreasing the intensity by a huge margin. And at the same time, while smoothing out the crimson, it will naturally mix with whatever remains of our previous wash, which was dystopian brown. Even if dry, these products will reactivate if they come in contact with other solvent-based products. This gives us the opportunity to make good transitions with lots of visual variety, mixing the small granules of Carry-On Crimson with the grimy feel of dystopian brown. Next step is going to be adding some highlights, but instead of acrylics, I'm using an oil paint. This is Absolum 502 Buff, and as you see, I'm softly passing it sort of like a very light dry brush. And I use this brush here that is a little bit messed up, but actually that's perfect, as I want to scrub a very small amount of oil onto this face, softly and kind of irregularly, so that I can follow this up by coming with a flat brush to feather out most of the imperfections. Of course, feathering makes everything look more nicely blended, but we also want to maintain some of that visual richness and variety. So we can use the brush in slightly different motions, either to leave brush marks or smooth out the colors. After this, I use Villainy Ink Ichor of the Damned, mixed 1:1 with mineral spirits. This is a black enamel wash that we can use to bring some darker contrast. I use a small quantity here to define the eyes, and once again, this will mix with what we have there, in this case, Carry-On Crimson. You see, it's all about using these colors in a creative way. Once you understand how they work, you can literally play with them. You can do things like blending, feathering, cleaning them, or leaving brush marks for texture, and much more. It's a different approach, slightly more loose but flexible. Nothing is really set in stone until it's fully cured. If you apply an enamel wash and you think it's too strong, you just feather it out or delete it completely. You have full control over the application, and you can simply come in with a Q-tip or different brushes and work those colors out exactly the way you want. Here I've painted the eyes and eyebrows off camera, but really that's pretty much it. You could probably leave it like this, or maybe do a couple of adjustments here and there, depending on your goals. Like here, for example, I go back to follow that same visual guide that I made myself with the acrylics, and add a slight stubble beard, mixing Absolum 502 Neutral Grey and Villainy Ink Colia Green. I work it out on the cheeks in a sort of stippling motion, always being mindful that these colors will blend with whatever is still lingering on that surface. So you can see here near the eyes that the Carrion Crimson dried with a slight reflective finish, representing a little bit of sweat or humidity or sebum present on skin. The redness on the nose suggests either an inconsiderate use of alcohol or maybe, I don't know, dermatitis. It's a little bit too exaggerated, but again, for the sake of a stylized effect, I say that it's perfectly fitting. After all, it's storytelling through painting. Enamel washes and oils are extremely versatile tools that beg you to be used in creative ways. It's not just about applying grime and then remove it. It's still perfectly viable and valid, but there's so much more beyond that. So if you seek more in-depth guides to develop your Grimdark style, you want to learn new techniques, or you're simply looking for more inspiration, head over to the Grimdark Compendium and explore our vast library of courses, available both for streaming and direct downloads. Also, make sure to check out the Villainy Ink resource page for some free videos and guides. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it gets you inspired to go to your painting station, experiment, and have some genuine fun. So thank you so much for watching. We will catch ya in the next.